Good afternoon, morning to everybody, those who are here and those who are joining us online. We are far behind time, so we have a lot of things to do, but I don't think we can do all of them, but we will try to go directly into the deep dive on the technical discussion on the subject that we are here to do today to discuss. So once again, thank you, Louis and the team for the opening ceremony. I will now invite the panelists to the front. We have some of them online. We have Dr. Chani from ICA. Okay. We have Dr. Christina Rambatis. And then we have our drone entrepreneur, Rose, as well, online. Then we have Dr. Katumuri Ruth here. We have His Excellency, Ambassador Professor Muhammadou. We've been having problem after the test session to connect him. I'm not sure if he's on now, otherwise I hope he will join soon. So we have spent the first part laying the background for today's session. What we're going to do is we have another video that just gives us example of some of the enterprises in the Commonwealth, of the hundreds of agricultural and fisheries enterprises that we are trying to work with, or we are trying to support with digitalization. So what we're going to do is, because of time, instead of 5 minutes, my panelists, instead of 5 minutes, I'm not going to give you 5 minutes, I'm going to give you 2 minutes each. You will introduce yourself within that 2 minutes, tell us who you are, and then respond to the question. So I'll go straight to our panelists from the Caribbean. Dr. Chani. Dr. Chani, you are based in one of our Commonwealth countries in the Caribbean, and you and your organization are working on this issue of climate and agriculture. Can you tell us the situation on the ground? How is the threat of climate change to the smallholder farmers and fisher folks on the ground?
Yes, thank you, Ben. Again, colleagues, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in such an event. My name is Charlie St. Martin. I work as a technical specialist in water and soil management for ICA. I'm originally from St. Lucia, but based in Trinidad here. But I'll go straight into it. One of the main things that we want to do, or we are doing as ICA in the Caribbean, is really to systematize the climate action in Caribbean sector, in the Caribbean agricultural sector. But the main threats that we have in the Caribbean, most of them are related to hydrometeorological threats, and that translates into the issue of droughts and extensive flooding there. Particularly if you look at from the years from 2015 to actually 2020 or 21 here now. In fact, over a 10-year period, we have essentially production loss in agriculture has been to the tune of $8.7 billion. And if you put that in context, you have that amount could actually pay for the Caribbean food import bill for a year and a half. What that means is that it is also larger than some of the GDP for some of the small island development countries. What that means is that over a 10-year cycle, we almost 1.5 years behind in terms of a lag period in terms of achieving food and nutrition security vis-a-vis the food import bill. And so that is the context that is there. What has ICA done with that? ICA has looked at while that is happening, when we look at the figures, and that is why I'm underlying this data, and I'm being very specific to use data, is that we are seeing that while that is happening, less than 1% of the money that is related to climate financing actually comes to the agricultural sector. So we are very vulnerable in the Caribbean because of the type of system, and yet still that financing is very limited. So ECA being responsible and operating based upon the priority of the organization, we have sought to try to address this by using a data-driven approach to position and to substantiate the clear role of agriculture as part of the solution in climate change. And we have done that through several projects. I'm just going to quickly name two of them. One that we are doing with our other partners, the University of Florida, the H.E Amb movement, where we are looking at strengthening the coastal and marine resources through upland interventions, the ecosystem-based approaches. And the fantastic thing that we are doing is that we are trying to get the citizens, the farmers, value the data. And I think that that is a discussion that we could have. It is not data just for a technical thing or the technocrats, but how do the people, their livelihood depends on it. How do they value data and how you allow them to connect to it so that they become self-perpetuating owners of it. And it is related to downstream activities, whether it is livelihood, etc. So we are doing that through a mechanism, what we call a 3-point mechanism. We do, we share, we do, we build, and we share. We do actions on the ground, we build the capacity to appreciate the data, etc. And then we actually share the findings so that it has or leads to possible policy implications. The last thing that I wanted to say is that we are also, because of that fundamental context that I described, we have the first Green Climate Fund regional project on agriculture, where we are actually, that becomes a central role. How do we prepare our data infrastructure? We have what we call climate trade-off analysis, building the capacity and institutionalizing it within our partner organization to treat with data and also to use that to develop bigger projects to inform. So in summary, these are the actions that we have been doing. We have been heavily focused on not just the drought and the flooding, but you would see in the Caribbean the issue of
Thank you.
is there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chani. So we have heard the situation on the ground. We will now go to, if you don't mind, I call you Christina.
Please, please do.
Okay. We will now go to Christina. Christina works with the World Resources Institute, and they are promoting an interesting concept called Digital Climate Advisory Services. We would like to hear more about it and some of the lessons that you have learned so far.
Sure, thank you. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and speak to you today. So I'm Christina Rambitis Del Rio with the World Resources Institute. And earlier this year, working with a number of partners, Columbia University, Global Center on Adaptation, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and the World Food Program, we launched what we call a blueprint for digital climate advisory services. And this was part of the Global Commission on Adaptation, which really looked at how to scale up action on adaptation globally. We chose to focus on digital climate advisory services because there's so much opportunity to reach the 300 million, we set a target of 300 million smallholder farmers. And the only way we're going to reach them in the time that we have to make a difference, as was highlighted earlier, is if we use digital technology and really look at mechanisms that can get to scale. However, there are lots of issues that need to be confronted in order to reach 300 million smallholder farmers. There's a lot of fragmentation, a lot of pilot projects that don't get to scale, not reaching the last mile, not reaching the most vulnerable populations, and not getting the level of investment, both public and private, that's needed to really reach the potential that the technology has to offer. And I should mention that when we talk about digital climate advisory services, we're not just talking about cell phones and apps and drones, but also digitally enabled technology and working with extension agencies and providing them with the information that they can reach non-digitally connected or non-digitally literate farmers. We developed this blueprint. It was launched earlier this year with a number of different recommendations. It was a number of principles of good practice that were developed from consultations and engagement of over 150 different individuals from 25 different organizations that really highlighted the need to focus on data quality and data assurance and the governance of that data. the need to focus on equity and reaching marginalized communities that we're currently not reaching. The issue of co-creation, the need for the products to be co-created with the farmers they aim to serve. And I was so delighted to hear Rose earlier when she was talking about the process that they use at Agri-Info. Her first words were, "We talk to the farmers," and that's exactly how it needs to be done. Another principle around accountability and transparency. We still don't have good ways of measuring the impact of these services and maintaining accountability both upwards to funders and governments, but also downwards to communities and farmers themselves. And then the last two that I want to highlight is really on scalability and financial sustainability. So we need to design for scale from the outset. We can't just do pilot projects and then expect to learn what we need to learn to get to scale. And we need to find business models that are financially sustainable over the long term. There will be different financial models in different places. Some areas are more digitally ready than others, of course. But we need to really be thinking about that financial sustainability from the outset. We've generated a number of recommendations. I won't have time to go into all of them, but we're looking at an investment on the order of $7 billion from public and private sources that's needed to reach 300 million smallholder farmers globally. But this provides a huge return on investment. The best estimates are 1 to 24 return on investment for service providers, and of course returns on investments around 30% in productivity gains for farmers, a little bit less than that in terms of income gains. So I'll stop there, but just to say we're so excited about the work happening here at the Commonwealth and really anxious to support in any way we can to help take forward the ambition of really reaching those on the front lines of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. So from the Caribbean to us here, from online to in person, we are seeing the relation between data and services. Dr. Chani talked about data-driven approach, and Christina mentioned the fact that there's a need to reach over 300 million smallholder farmers with digital climate advisory services. The focus of the session is more than that. We want to see the data infrastructure behind the services. And to do that, we need to talk about the data itself that supports the services that Christina just mentioned. So two of our experts will take two angles, one from drone data and the other on satellite data. So I'll begin with one of our online panelists, Rose again, who demonstrated the drone to tell us, a brief, a minute or two, something that is already not captured in the drone about drone data and how that is supporting advisory services.
Thank you. I got cut a bit there, but I think the question is around how do you manage the drone data? Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Rose Punja. I am from Tanzania. I'm happy to be here and to talk about data, which is something that we deal with. In Tanzania, what is actually happening is there's a draft that is being done around data protection. So we're happy about that because prior to that, there's bits and tits that were being collected from other legislations that have passed that were mostly a bit stringent because some of them were coming from cybersecurity or banking sector or telecommunication sectors. And for us, we see a huge possibility, a huge opportunity in the kind of data that we collect. As the previous speaker has just talked about digitalization, because for us, the actual what is happening on the ground is one extension officer is in charge of almost 1,000 families in providing them with good agriculture practices. And we know that is almost impossible. So we see that digitalization is the way to go. in a way of providing this. But as far as drones are concerned, we see that the opportunity is to get the data on demand. So we know that we're all talking about climate change, and that as part of climate change is what is happening is not constant. So you can't give a blanket advisory to everyone. You have to see what is happening on the ground, and that's where the drone comes in. It's on demand. Where you want it, you can fly to collect the data, but the data is also very robust. So sometimes one of the things that are being faced is how to transport data from the rural areas to actually where we can actually process it and give that timely advice. So transporting the data, because the internet infrastructure, especially in the rural setting, does not support us transporting or uploading that kind of massive data collection. So that is one. But we see that with what is happening, the government is trying on our end in terms of putting structures in place to make that happen. And we hope that the dream of supporting the 300 million overall smallholder farmers will come to fruition. But then the other thing is what has also been alluded to is in terms of smallholder farmers, you have to customize what you give them at the end. So for us, our practice is to actually water down what we collect into advisory information that is transported, is given to them via short messages. So they don't have to be online or have smartphones for them to get that advisory information. But the other thing that goes into that, which the data infrastructure can now support, is financing. Because as much as you give the information, the advisory, it's all good. But if the farmer cannot finance, if the farmer cannot procure fertilization of pesticides, then you have issues. So the data infrastructure can also support in that end. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rose. Because of time, so I had to cut you. We need more time, and we need the environment that we are all sitting together to dialogue on some of these topics. So now from Tanzania back to the Commonwealth Secretariat, we have our Senior Director, Dr. Ruth Katmuri. The Secretariat has been driving an interesting, innovative project across the Commonwealth. We would like to hear from Ruth some of the lessons that we have learned so far, and any other case that that she has, maybe prior to coming to the Secretariat, to share with us on this issue of satellite or Earth observation data for digital climate advisory services.
Thank you, Benjamin. I hope you can hear. Let me start by saying why this is important for the Secretariat. 60% of Commonwealth members are small island states. And I want to start with just a small statistics. 26% of the land area of small island developing states, SIDS for short, are okay. Is this better? Can you hear me now? Okay, I hope you can hear me now. Okay. So I just wanted to start by saying that 60% of the Commonwealth members are small island developing states. So SIDS for short. And I just want to start with a few simple statistics. 26% of land area of SIDS are below 5 meters, are under 5 meters above the sea level. 29% of population live under 5 meters above sea level. Now that is scary. I would find it very scary. And then what else is happening? If you look at GDP terms, average annual loss from disasters are as percent of national GDP, have most of the top countries of Secretariat as countries as SIDS, with target countries listed. For example, I'm going to give some examples of the common sensing project that the Secretariat is involved with. And so among these, Vanuatu is ranked as number 2, and Solomon Islands is ranked as number 10, and Fiji is ranked as number 11. These are the countries. The ranks indicate average annual loss from disasters as percentage of national GDP. These are among the top countries. Just to start with that, but then just to tell you what project I'm going to talk about is the Commonwealth Secretariat is part of the International Partnership Program, IPP Common Sensing, which supports building climate resilience in small island nations. What it does, it is involved in frontline research and innovation on global issues affecting developing countries. This is a consortium of international partners, which includes UNITAR, which is the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. It includes UNOSAT, which is UN Operational Satellite Applications Program, the Commonwealth Secretariat, UK Met Office, University of Portsmouth, among other members. And in that program, what we have been working is, we are working with 3 member countries, which I listed before, which is Fiji, Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu. Now, just quickly, since Benjamin said my past, so actually what's been fascinating about looking at drones is, I have been in farms as a teenager in rural India, where we used very, very basic, not much technology. And I was a teenager a few decades ago. But the problem is that the fascinating thing is now how data and technology has evolved in recent decades. And that's why Rose's presentation about drones is just absolutely exciting. I've been in farms trying to measure the soil, do the soil testing, and then design experiments. And then of course, now the whole thing is about weather prediction. So now Common Sensing is a fascinating project which uses satellite data to warn weather events for these member countries. But also the important part of this project is that it also helps enable access to finance for our member countries. And this we do through the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub, which is a flagship program of the Commonwealth Secretariat, where we have in-country advisors in about 16 countries who work, again, co-creation, you mentioned, Christina. It's working with member countries, understanding what their priorities are, and then enabling access to finance. And in that process, and today's conference, the Cop26 is extremely important in the context of implementation and also moving the engines of finance availability in order to be able to help with the implementation. So through this program of the Climate Finance Access Hub, partnering closely with the Common Sensing program, I'll just give you some examples. An example is to support the sugarcane sector in Fiji, where we collated data sets from various sources, and climate models help in protection of Fiji's sugar industry in ensuring ongoing regional food security and to maximize foreign earnings potential amidst changing climate. Through the Common Sensing project, sugar plantation mapping was provided to increase overall resilience in this sector by understanding the distribution of sugar plantations and to build a baseline reference data set so that impact can be assessed after extreme weather events. The Common Sensing project also included developing a digital platform that can be used to model sugar mills production to optimize inputs for better yields and thus safeguard foreign exchange returns for the country. So I just gave an example. I will stop here, but that's the excitement that we have, that right now data and technology in the 4th industrial revolution are central to enable and help build resilience, access to finance, and everything else going forward. So thank you very much, and I pass it back to Ben.
Thank you, Senior Director. So we have one more panelist, His Excellency Ambassador Professor Muhammadou from the Gambia to WTO and UN in Geneva. I hope he's there. His Excellency, okay, His Excellency is there. He brings in 2 perspectives as a technical person in this area, as well as a political background. So I got in touch with him because of this reason. So His Excellency, we would like to know the policy implications of all that we've been talking about. Are there any policy implications for our member countries? If yes, what are some of them?
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me loudly.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, my machine crashed midway, so I missed some part of the interventions. But from what I've heard, since time is not in abundance, I would say that a couple of policy implications that needs to be factored. One is capacity and competencies, scaling up the actors and agents to be able to manage and maintain and provide access for a robust data infrastructure and the optimal utilization of data, as well as the emerging technologies. The technological aspect is also important in terms of its adoption. There are quite a number of emerging technologies that are relevant for smallholder farmers and artisan fisheries for climate resilience, for operations of farms, for scaling up productivity. The tendency is to tend to focus more on data. And I think the policy implication is we will not yield the optimal desired outcome that will eventually bring efficiencies in the value chains and in the ecosystem just by focusing on data. So thus the importance of going beyond data to put in place a robust, smart, resilient, and agile data infrastructure across the Commonwealth. When we say data infrastructure, basically it's a set of fundamental facilities, the basic structure of a system that is necessary for access and exchange of agricultural data, as well as other forms of data that can impact agricultural data for decision making, user data and content data, agriculture and fisheries data. The perspective is that agriculture or fisheries data consists of content data as well as user data. At the content data, it is derived from soil maps, agronomic data, weather data, fish catch data, market data, etc. The user data on farmers, on fishers, on traders, on consumers, on research networks, on extension networks, on financial institutions, and cooperatives. So these two types of data are essential elements for the data infrastructure. The challenges of data access, the current challenges are within the sector. It's not about the absence of data. There's abundance of data that exists, but the challenge is to have the right infrastructure to support data access and use. And this has policy implications for the Commonwealth. The current model is that each of the digital agriculture service providers is investing in content data and user data. If you have 20 service providers in Kenya, in principle, they are all profiling the same farmers. The result will be duplication of data, poor data quality as we are double counting the number of users we reach, waste of scarce resources, and the data is completely out of the hands of our national governments, etc. The future implications is unknown. However, there is a different perspective, an alternative model, where we need to have the national governments in Commonwealth countries to be involved in some way, not to start a new investment in user data generation or content data production. There are enough already in most of our countries across the Commonwealth. What is the coordinating role of our governments in the Commonwealth? What kind of data infrastructure that needs to be put in place to support the current data? Importantly, practical systems with national focus, and then connect them across the Commonwealth. One of the presenters talked about a very important aspect of the data infrastructure, which is connectivity. The digital divide and access to affordable broadband connectivity is a reality across the Commonwealth, and policies, smart policies, have to be in place to ensure that there is connectivity. The other aspect is interoperability of the data infrastructure so that actors and agents in the ecosystems and value chains in Senegal or in Kenya or in Cote d'Ivoire can be integrated and access and share this data in an open mechanism. So as part of the data infrastructure, open governance is also important. Also ensuring that we have smart data infrastructure that will enable our member states to begin to build climate-based digital platforms and services, or agriculture digital platforms and services, which provides huge opportunities for our youth folk, and to ensure that women are not left behind, not only in the connectivity side, but in the access of digital infrastructure for use of services that sits on digital platforms. The other policy implications along those lines is the policy regimes around data, around governance, around access. These need to be approached in a comprehensive and holistic manner across the Commonwealth. There needs to be emergence of partnering and collaboration of private sector and CSOs, as well as private players in the technological landscape that can have influences in digital platforms and services, because the infrastructure alone has to be harnessed. And to be harnessed, we have to build capacity, competencies with our youth who will build these services. Lastly, we cannot afford to have a policy mechanism around data infrastructure without ensuring that our learning institutions are equally equipped to be participants in building the landscape and the ecosystem. Because where the wealth creation and addressing real needs of the farmers and smallholder farmers or artisan fisheries is our ability to include them in the design, implementation, and build-up of services that can utilize a very robust data infrastructure. So I would say, Benjamin, this is data infrastructure is the future. Imagine what we can do if we build, connect, and sustain agriculture data infrastructure or fisheries data infrastructure across the Commonwealth for small states that are technologically equipped to be able to utilize real-time data from a very integrated and interoperable data infrastructure and share these data in a timely manner to extract intelligence that can feed into policy, that can feed into other related value-creating activities that can uplift our people. So the concept of data infrastructure should be, in my perspective, the focus rather than reducing it only to data and quality data. We have enough data, we have enough tools, we have enough applications, but if you don't have a robust, smart data infrastructure that is designed, built, factoring the farmers' needs, their requirements, and the services that are required, and use the tools that are emerging, such as IoTs, the Internet of Things, blockchains, machine learning algorithms, and use our youths to be participants in using these AI technologies. You talked about drone, and channel them to sit on this infrastructure and build platforms and services that can be of value to the farmers to influence the value chain. Thank you very much.
Thank you, His Excellency. I know if we give you the next 30 minutes, you continue to hammer these points, but because of time, we need to move on. Thank you once again for bringing those points together. I know there are people sitting here I don't know if any of you have any question. If you have any question, by hands. Otherwise, I don't want to leave you behind. No questions from the audience here. Thank you. So because of time, I don't know whether my panelists will have closing 1 minute. If you have any concluding message, if you don't have to, if you have any concluding message.
I guess I just want to correspond with the ambassador's incredible remarks on data infrastructure and really how much of it is about putting together that infrastructure, that governance system, to be able to use the data for so many different purposes. It's not just about bespoke little projects, but really to use it and repackage it for different value chains, for government level initiatives and planning at so many multiple levels of governance. And so I just really wanted to highlight that and say I think that's incredibly important.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that, okay. So, Ambassador, that's really very helpful feedback that you gave, because that reiterates the importance of working closely with the countries and also making the data relevant and also utilizing the data effectively, both in terms of project implementation as well as access to finance. And that's the example, the common sensing example that we had talked about works very closely in that regard. And it's very happy, it's encouraging to know that these are actually very relevant and this is what the countries are looking for. So thank you for your comments, Ambassador.
Thank you. Any online panelists? Okay, Dr. Cheney, just 1 minute.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I would also like to agree with what His Excellency said. However, while also recognizing that in some instances, for example, in some of the Caribbean territories, there is merit in actually gathering more data because of the resolutions and the breaking in time. So I don't think it's an either or. I think it's very context specific when you look at the data infrastructure and also updating it and getting the data resolution that is needed, particularly at a high resolution. Thanks.
I fully agree with you because just yesterday or the day before, I was talking to a lady from the Caribbean who is an expert in fisheries. And she mentioned the same thing. She said, look, the fisheries area, we are still lacking data. So yes, I agree. Yes, we need to take both approach. Prof, your last word.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I wish we had more time, but I just had some last minute thoughts that I wanted to recommend. One is placing digital infrastructure for digitalization at the core of national governments in the Commonwealth for growth and transformation, and put strategies and policies in place. The second one is creating a transparent and smart regulatory framework around data and around data infrastructure that will promote the development and confident use of data, quality data, as Chani mentioned, and as well as the utilization of digital technologies and services and limit to risk. Also, we need talent, we need competences. Digital infrastructure and digital services cannot be guided with weak talents. It requires talent. So therefore, the recommendation must be to expand the curricular and university program structure to spur digital innovation and development across the Commonwealth with AgTech. Also, I would say increasing investments in R&D. R&D is required to harness and create and extract value from a well-placed digital infrastructure. Because where the value creation is in the ability to have thought leadership and knowledge to create services that will be useful for the ecosystem.
Thank you.
Yeah, last minute, investing in the last mile infrastructure to bridge the digital divide. I think one of the panelists did mention that, because if you build the digital infrastructure and you want to utilize all these emerging technologies, and there is no connectivity, there is no access, there is digital divide, where it matters in the rural communities where you have most of our smallholder farmers, the digital infrastructure will not yield its optimal value. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. To end the session, I would like to invite our head of section, Mr. Kirk Haywood, to give us the closing remarks and the way forward. Hope Kirk is there, because we are behind time. Rose, I wish I can give you time to say stuff, but is Kirk there?
Yeah,
yes, Kirk is there.
Thanks, Benjamin, and thanks, colleagues, and apologies to Rose. However, I don't think this is the end of the conversation, because we've had such rich discussions. You know, it's clear we need to take forward, one, a discussion, but two, translate this into some action. You know, on the discussion side, in terms of next steps, you know, I heard at least 3 themes come out on people, you know, the farmers, skills, inclusiveness, partnerships, the various actors and how they work, and 3 on policies. Ben, what I would recommend is we try and get these colleagues back together again in outside of COP, together with our member states, particularly our colleagues from the Ministries of Agriculture, the Ministries of Trade, so they can hear some of these stories. So in the context of a cluster meeting, to invite everyone back, that's one step. And the second step is then to translate some of the issues here we heard into action. So we heard about the digital divide, which everyone spoke about. There we can speak about, for instance, this is one of our 5 streams of work. We have, in fact, right now a self-paced e-course on the policy implication of the digital divides that we're running for policymakers and other stakeholders. You can reach out to us about that, but then also translate it into the BDS work we're doing and the advisory work that we'll be doing with countries. So my recommendation is the next steps would be to gather colleagues again, but bring them together with our member states inside a formal cluster meeting to see if we can take some of these lessons and translate it into actual action on the ground. Thanks, Ben. Let me hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Kirk. So with that, we bring the session to an end. As Kirk said, this is just the beginning. We've started with digital climate advisory services. We're going to do that under different contexts like market linkages, financial inclusion, and advisory services. So we look forward to engaging with you. And if you have any question, please contact us, and we are willing to work with you to take this forward. Once again, thank you. Those who join us from Zoom, and only Christina is sitting here. Thank you for spending time with us. Okay, bye. Thank you.